What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be going over the Winnipeg Jets 28th overall pick in this upcoming NHL entry draft. Now, I am not a big junior hockey person. I don't watch a ton of junior hockey, but thankfully Hulk does. So we're going to be collaborating on this video together. I asked him to compile 5 prospects that he thinks the Winnipeg Jets could take and should take with the 28th overall pick in the first round, and we teamed up to make this video. I couldn't have done this without him. Big help on this video. Everybody go check him out on Twitter. And without further ado, let's take a look at 5 prospects that the Winnipeg Jets could draft in the first round. The first prospect we're going to be talking about today is Braden Coots from the Seattle Thunderbirds of the WHL. He's a centerman, 18 years old, 6 foot flat, 183, projected to be drafted in the mid to late first round. Coots is a guy that, definitely is being mocked, towards more of the middle of the draft to, the early 20s, so it's a little bit of a stretch to think that he may fall to the Jets, but Hulk points out that there are a lot of things in his game that could force him to fall. Hulk points out that, he was barely over a point per game this year in the WHL, and this is a league where, you see a ton of players go over a point per game, so there could be concerns about his offensive output and force him to fall. In 60 games, Coots had 26 goals, 37 assists for 63 points total. Nothing to scoff at for sure, but in the WHL, there are guys that had much better offensive outputs, and a lot of them. There are also some concerns about his physical game, as Hulk points out that sometimes in those bigger, heavier matchups, sometimes he gets washed away, isn't the most effective on the board battles either. But this is a first round projected player. What makes him a first round projected player? The thing that I noticed right away was his skating. Very smooth, very soft. Hulk points this out as well too. And he also points out that he's got great vision and nose for the net. The Jets love drafting players with high IQ, good vision. Take a look at Cole Perfetti, Brad Lambert, Nikita Chibrikov. These are all players that have incredible vision. List goes on of players that they've drafted with those attributes in the past. These attributes are incredibly important to becoming an NHL player and becoming a good NHL player, and Hulk points out that these are the type of attributes that can force players to really explode at the next level. You know how many teams are out there right now looking for a forward that can be a smooth skater with a nose for the net? The answer is 32 of them. So Coots is going to be highly sought after. These attributes, they don't grow on trees. He does them at an elite level. And, this would be a great pick for Winnipeg if he were to fall. Hulk is extremely high on Coots, as he has him number 11 on his big board. I believe Coots is a really good player too. I think it's a little bit unlikely that we see him fall to 28, but if he does, I don't think the Winnipeg Jets are going to waste much time running up to the podium. Next up on the list, we're going to be talking about Bill Zonin from the Armada of the QMJHL, center/winger prospect, 18 years old, 6'2", 190, big forward there in junior, very fun prospect. He's projected to go late first round, maybe early to mid second round. The first thing I noticed when watching this guy's tape is, this is a Winnipeg Jets type player, and Hulk points that out here in his write-up on him. He calls him the bread and butter Jets draft pick this year, the guy that they love to deploy in their middle six, and he's so right for that. He's a play-driving physical forechecker, and we've seen a ton of those in the Jets' middle six. Great vision, once again, an attribute that the Jets love to look for in the draft, but he does struggle a bit when the pace ramps up, as Hulk states here. He is a very good prospect, but, not a very quick player, to say the least. Very average skater, Hulk points out. He also adds that he's a player that, when the speed does ramp up, isn't always the most, effective player, right? So, something to note about him. But something that is really good in his game is his ability to win puck battles. He's great on the boards, but his vision really does help his game a ton, as he's become an excellent passer as well. This guy has a ton of tools, and that makes him, a Swiss Army knife. You can really play him wherever, and, that's a guy that, again, the Jets would probably love to have in their system. You take a look at Alex Iafallo, a guy that plays on the fourth line a lot of the time for the Jets, but he can also play on the first line, right? Because he's got a blend of different attributes, good defensively, but also can add, some passing ability offensively as well. He played 64 games in the queue this year, putting up 28 goals, but 55 assists really popped off the sheet for me for a total of 83 points. He also chipped in 8 goals and 8 assists in 13 games for 16 points in the playoffs for the Huskies this past season, so pretty good year all around for Bill Zonin. Now, when I took a look at Zonin's tape, he wasn't a guy that really intrigued me as much as, a more fun offensive player like Coots did. However, he is a very Winnipeg Jets type player, right? That guy that can really go up and down your lineup, versatile, can help with different things, big body, physical. Could definitely be somebody that I see the Winnipeg Jets drafting. Hulk would really like the pick, he said, but he is worried about Zonin at the next level and worried that he may get stagnant and kind of just turn into a bottom six, checking forward, which, could definitely happen with his skill set here and lack of skating ability. So we'll see what happens, but Bill Zonin could definitely be there when the Winnipeg Jets pick at 28. Next up on the board is Milton Gastron from Moto Hockey of the SHL, another center winger prospect, 18 years old, listed at 6'1", 185. Another one of those guys that could be, later first round, maybe an early second round pick. Now, Gastron is one of those guys that is not a sure thing. Hulk points out that Bill Zonin was definitely more of a safe pick. This would be the total opposite and more of, a dart throw, in terms of his ceiling. He could really be a boom or bust pick. Now, what are the reasons for him being boom or bust? One of the reasons is, at times he looks like he could be a top 5 forward in the entire class. As Hulk points out, he's a very good offensively gifted forward, but, admittedly is playing against weaker competition as he did play in the Swedish Junior League. So, maybe weaker competition than some of, the other prospects in this draft, but still had a very successful year. Diving into Gastron's game, though, Hulk does have some concerns about his success at the next level, as he does have an incredible shot, but sometimes does lean on it far too much. Even sometimes, taking poor shot angles or just taking shots from way too far out and killing offensive play. And, sometimes he makes some maneuvers that aren't going to be working at the next level, at pro hockey. It's just not going to be happening. But he is one of the youngest prospects in the draft at 17. There's a lot of room for growth with Gastron. However, with all that room for growth, he's already a great player, and Hulk pointed out to me that, when this guy is on a heater, he is on a heater, and he's one of the best players in this draft. Not only offensively either, he plays a full game, big on the forecheck, creates turnovers in the defensive zone, but he can also, like we mentioned before, light it up offensively. At the U18 National play this year, he had 32 points in just 19 games. This guy is nothing to play with. My takeaway looking at Gastron was, this guy is one of the more talented prospects out there, and that's basically what Hulk says here in his write-up. He's probably better than 97% of the entire class talent-wise, he said. Gastron is still young and does need to get out some of these, bad habits that he's developed there in the SHL. If he does that, I think he'll be a very good prospect. However, if he doesn't, Hulk states that, he could be an AHL/NHL forward, not really a guy that most teams like to play in their bottom six, so, could end up being a fringe guy. But, if he's able to take his game to the next level, this could be one of the players to watch and one of the guys that, we take a look at in a few years and say, wow, how did that guy fall all the way to 28? The next prospect we're going to be talking about is Ivan Robkin from the Lumberjacks of the USHL, plays center and wing, 18 years old, built like a truck, 5'11", 209 as an 18-year-old. He's projected to be drafted late first round, early second round pick. He had kind of a weird year because he was bouncing between the KHL junior leagues, wasn't finding a ton of success. He crossed over overseas to, America, came to the USHL, and he became a dominant offensive threat. The rankings for this guy are all over the place. Like Craig Button and Bob McKenzie have him ranked around the 20 mark, and then there's other places that have him ranked as like the 45th prospect in the draft, right? So there are a lot of pros and cons to his game that were shown, but a lot of it, as Hulk states, had to do with his environment. His time with the Dynamo, when he was getting going in the offensive zone, it was very clear that he was one of the best players, if not the best player on the ice at all times. This guy's an ozone demon. His transitional play is absolutely incredible, and he's great at sustaining pressure in the O-zone. I mean, this is a monster. Hulk also notes that he has an incredible knack for intercepting passes and being able to steal pucks, which, contribute to more time in the O-zone. With being able to be a puck hound like this, he was putting his teammates in fantastic situations to score. Unfortunately, a lot of the times the finishing wasn't there, and, he didn't come up with the points. With this happening so much, Hulk states that, he kind of got frustrated, was trying to do everything himself, which led to some bad offensive habits, and, he was just doing stuff that wouldn't work at the pro level. He's definitely a project, could definitely be a center with that build, 5'11", but a heavier forward. Could definitely be a fun player in the future. The Jets have developed players like, Robkin in the past, such as Brad Lambert, as Hulk states there in the write-up. So Ivan Robkin, definitely a guy to watch. Now, talking about the last prospect in this video, we're going to be talking about Cameron Reed from the Kitchener Rangers of the OHL. He's the only defenseman that we'll be talking about today. 18 years old, listed at 6 foot 174. Again, projected to be late first, early second round range. The first thing I noticed in Reed's game was his positioning and his skating ability. A guy that rarely finds himself out of position. Just a really smart, high IQ player, and that hockey IQ, Jets love that. Hulk points out that, with him being a smaller defenseman, sometimes defending the cycle does, become an issue, as he's not the most physical defenseman ever. So if he's out there for long periods of time, sometimes he does find himself caught out there. But he does point out that at the NHL level, this shouldn't be as much of an issue as he would think, as he's incredible at denying entry. If the puck's not in your zone very often, you don't have to get stuck in your zone for very often, right? Just makes sense. Reed is a pretty gifted offensive defenseman as well. There's really no trait that he has that stands out. As Hulk states, he's not, Makar level deking. He doesn't have that big shot, but he is an offensive presence out there. Maybe not a power play quarterback, at the NHL level, but definitely not a guy that's, hurting on the offensive side. In terms of stylistical fit, this guy can really fit anywhere in the NHL. I mean, most teams would love to have a guy like this, and that's why he is a top pick. The defenseman in this draft, I know you're probably wondering why only one D-man on this board. The D-man board is thin this year. It's not really a very impressive class on the defensive end, and Hulk points out that he projects Reed to come out to be like a Declan Chisholm type of player. Fans in Winnipeg, we know all about Declan Chisholm, thriving over there as bottom pairing guy that's able to step up into your second pairing defenseman, and that's always good to have. But a player like that in that projection that could possibly go in the first round, right? It shows you how weak this class is. I don't think Cameron Reed's a bad idea at all, but definitely more of a benefactor with the weak class. But those are 5 prospects that Hulk told me to take a look at. He did an incredible write-up on it. I couldn't have made this video without him. Incredible insight on these prospects. Half this video is just me taking a look at Hulk's notes just because they were that good. So definitely go give him some love. I hope he does some kind of content himself or applies for a pro scouting job, because this guy is awesome. So yeah, definitely go check out Hulk. If you haven't already, leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let me know who you think out of the 5 the Winnipeg Jets should draft, or if you have a draft crush of your own, let me know in the comments down below. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Go Jets, go. Bye-bye.